Hello and welcome back to another Promise of God found in our Promises Kept Bible study. And we are on, 64 today. And today we are going to be in the book of 2 Corinthians, the second letter that the Apostle Paul sent out to the Corinthian church just to encourage them to keep on walking the walk and to give them some great theology, as we're going to see today. So go to chapter number 5 in 2 Corinthians, and our verse is verse 21. And I'll read it and then let's talk about it. Verse 21, chapter 5, 2 Corinthians. For our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So looking at that, we've got obviously who we're talking about here is Jesus, but for he made him, for our sake he made him, God the Father made him, Jesus, to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So it's really this is a huge part of the gospel, the good news, what Jesus did for us. And the theology of it, it's good to look at it just because it's important. It's really important to know what God the Father sent Jesus to do. And clearly we get the evidence here from Paul telling us that Jesus knew no sin. So Jesus was perfect, 100% man, 100% God, yet he walked on this earth and never committed a sin, which is impossible unless you're God, right? Absolutely impossible. There's no way to get through life without having a bad thought or sharing an angry word or lusting or lying or whatever. One time, doesn't matter, one time and you've ruined your perfect record. Well, Jesus, not one time. Can you imagine? Can you imagine Mary and Joseph, what they experienced just raising a perfect child? It was pretty hard to even imagine what that looks like, but that's what it says, and that is the truth, that Jesus, being fully human, was fully perfect. Now, the part here that I want to just talk about says for our sake, for our sake. So God the Father, because of us, for our sake, he made his only son, Jesus, to be sin. Be sin. That is a lot stronger language than you might know. Everybody knows the language, Jesus took my sin on the cross, took the sin of the world on him. But how about hearing it this way? Jesus became every single sin that was ever committed on this planet. He did the action of every single sin that's ever been committed. So the verb part of it, he became it, the embodiment of everything that is evil. That is what Jesus became for our sake. Now again, you have to kind of look at it and say, okay, what in the world would it take for somebody, how about a human, to say, you know what, for somebody else's sake, so that they do better, I am going to become somebody terrible, evil. Let's just say it this way. For their sake, because let's say they're in a terrible abusive relationship, I am going to murder their spouse so that they have freedom from the terrible relationship. It's a terrible kind of a picture, and it's not the best example, but it's that thought that you're innocent, you've done nothing, but you've decided for the sake of somebody else to do something heinous, to do it, not just think about it, to actually commit that act. That is what happened. Jesus decided to become everything: murderous, adulterous, lusting, angry, slothful, discontent. He became all of that. Full body became it in every bit of him for our sake. It's just unimaginable. You wouldn't even exchange a little bit of your good standing in the community for somebody else, probably. You wouldn't cheat and steal and lie so somebody got off. I mean, people do it, but just think about you. Would you do it? Jesus did it for our sake, became the embodiment of sin. And with that, we always have to add the piece that because he became that, God the Father poured all his wrath, his anger, his justice out on Jesus, who deserves none of it. So think of every sin in the entire world committed, the embodiment of evil and sin, what God the Father had to do to counterbalance that, eradicate it. That is the picture now, hopefully, of you're getting of what happened on that cross. The horrific nature of Jesus' death being the physical representation or the physical action of God's wrath onto the earth, all directed at Jesus, who deserved none of it. And Jesus decided to do it for our sake. That's the theology that saves us. And then this is the piece of it. So in him we might become the righteousness of God. So in him we become the righteousness of God. Just think, Jesus was up there and he is taking the penalty that we deserve. All of our sin is in him. All of the evil we've committed, it's in him. He gets the punishment, the horrific punishment of God, and we get his perfect, righteous looking self. That's what we get. We become right, perfect righteousness. That's what that means. We become the righteousness of God. Jesus is the righteousness of God, right? Jesus is the embodiment of what a perfect human should look like on the earth. Only God could be perfect, could be fully righteous and walk this earth. So in him, in Jesus' action, when we trust in him, put our sin in the lump of billions and billions of other sins in with him, we get the perfect 10 for 10 of Jesus, the righteousness of God. It's mind-blowing, but you have to know, and we've said it before, that the only thing that could do that, the only way that all of that sin could be wiped away is the perfect blood of God being spilled. It had to be a blood sacrifice. Without the shedding of blood, there's no remittance of sin. And so God himself had to pour out every ounce of his blood so that we could be cleansed of the sin and free from the penalty that lays on our head, the wrath of God, which would have sent us to hell, really. God doesn't send us, but our sin sends us. So and here Paul, in one line, one verse, is saying that to the Corinthians, and he's already taught them all this, but he's reiterating it. And for you, maybe you've been taught it too years ago. You've heard all this and whatever, but maybe it's time for a refresher to remember what, oh yeah, he took my sin on the cross. What that really, really means. There's a penalty on you and it needs to be paid. And Jesus did it. And he did it by becoming pure evil. Deciding to do that. All the actions. It just, bleh. Anyway, all right. Oh, I want to give you your homework for next week. For this week, we have verses coming up for this week. And again, our homework is always to read them, pick one that you love, try to just put it in its context, study it a little bit, and then maybe memorize it if you can. That would be good, just for your own help, so that you can be encouraged when Satan comes to attack. You can pull out a promise of God. So for this week, coming up tomorrow, we have Jeremiah 30:17. And then the next day, it'll be Ephesians 1:7, and then Romans 6:14, and then Deuteronomy 29:9, and then back to the Psalms, Psalm 37:24, and then the last one will be Isaiah 54, verse 10. All right, hopefully one of them, you really love it, and hopefully you put in the time to study ahead of time. It's a Bible study after all, people. Let's work. All right. See you next time. Bye.